Good evening, everyone. I'm David Selberg, CEO at Hospice of Santa Barbara. Last year, our Illuminate Speakers series reached close to 10,000 viewers from some 46 states and over 58 countries. Tonight, we have so many folks tuning in from across the United States as well as internationally. And a very special thank you to the Santa Barbara Foundation, to Robin and Roger Hemovitz, and to the Natalie Orfila Foundation for their generous support and sponsorship of this entire Illuminate Speakers series in 2022. Now I have the pleasure to introduce my friend and colleague at Hospice of Santa Barbara, Charles Caldwell. Hi, Charles.
Hi there, David. It's great to be here tonight. I'm very excited for opportunity to listen to what Jack and Trudy have to share. Finally, I just wanted to mention that we created the Illuminate Speaker Series as a response to our community. Many people were just facing a variety of different challenges over the past couple of years. And we felt that if we were able to offer some amazing teachers who could share a little bit of what they've learned on the journey of how we might all be able to move through this time a little bit better, that would be a wonderful opportunity. But we're only able to do this through the support of people like you, as all of our programs, and this is offered free, completely free. So please consider making a donation. You can find a link in the chat feature. David, back to you.
Thank you so much, Charles. And now I have truly the honor and the pleasure of introducing our featured Illuminate speakers, Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman. Jack Kornfield is the co-founder and senior teacher at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Northern California. Jack trained as a Buddhist monk in the monasteries of Thailand, India, and Burma. He has taught meditation internationally since 1974 and is one of the key teachers to introduce Buddhist mindfulness practice to the West. Trudy Goodman is the founder and guiding teacher of Insight LA in Los Angeles. Insight LA is a nonprofit organization for secular mindfulness education and Vipassana meditation training. She teaches extensively in the field of meditation and psychotherapy at conferences and retreats nationwide. So without further ado, we're excited to welcome Jack Kornfield and Trudy Goodman to our Illuminate Speakers series. Jack and Trudy, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. And also, it's great to recognize 48 years of the work of Hospice of Santa Barbara, free, serving so many people going through the big changes of life that hospice work does. So vows of real deep appreciation and gratitude. So tonight we gave the theme of really a question one might ask of oneself when you wake up in the morning. What would love have me do today? When you look at your to-do list and go through the agenda, this is one of the questions to put on it. And, you know, we talked about in our little blurb for this grounding and presence and common humanity and mindful loving awareness and compassion and so forth. Let's just start by inviting a sense of presence. Wherever you are, if you can, let yourself settle down for a moment. Maybe take a couple of long breaths. And remember, as you feel yourself seated in this human body on this remarkable planet, halfway between heaven and earth, you take your seat. Remember the sense of mystery and presence with it. A short poem from Pat Schneider. It's a kind of love, is it not? how the cup holds the tea, how the chair stands sturdy and foursquare, how the floor receives the bottom of shoes or toes, how soles of feet know where they're supposed to be. I've been thinking about the patience of ordinary things, how clothes wait respectfully in closets, and soap dries quietly in the dish, and towels drink the wet from the skin of the back, and the lovely repetition of stairs, and what is more generous than a window? And I start with this to get you to smile a little bit, as Trudy is doing, but also it's an invitation for a different kind of love. It's the love of presence. To go a little further, a short meditation, deepen this sense of presence and grounding. Let your eyes close for a moment, for a few minutes actually. And again, sense your breath and let it relax. Let it breathe itself any way it wants. And as you come into the present here and now, notice the state of your body, the places that ache and the places that feel pleasure even now, the warmth or cool or heaviness, the tension and the ease. And feel everything that your body carries for you. And bring in a quality of gratitude and compassion. Feeling this body, thank you for carrying so much. Grateful, thank you. You can relax just now, I'm okay, in this moment, as you thank the body. Let it rest and be just here. And notice too the state of your heart and mind. Right now, all the emotions carried by the heart, the longing and worry and love and joy and desire and frustration. Oh, the heart carries so much. And the mind too, trying to help you figure it out and keep you safe. And as you feel the heart and mind, as if to make a bow, you can say thank you for caring so much, for trying so hard to keep me safe. I'm okay just now. You can relax. You can rest. And feel coming into the present, just here and now, you become loving awareness itself. There's the state of the body, the feelings of the heart, the stories the mind tells, images, plans, remembering, and who you are is the vast loving awareness that notices this. You shift your identity from being caught to becoming who you really are. That consciousness, that awareness that was born into this body and will leave it. And as the loving witness, everything else flows from that. So let your eyes open gently again. And here we are, coming into the present. And the thing about the present is it has the specifics of the stairs and the windows and the people around you and the things that you worry about and that care about. But as you recall, the Ojibwe have a saying, sometimes I go about pitying myself when all the while I'm being carried by vast winds across the sky. And there's a much greater dance that's happening that we are a part of. The question is not the future of humanity, but the presence of eternity. And some part of you knows this just as you were able to lovingly witness what your body and heart and mind are carrying and all they're doing to try and keep you safe, and to say thank you. You know it when you walk in the high mountains or take a pause in your busy day to just go outside among the trees. You know it making love or being there in the most tender moments when a child is born, or at the end of life when you're holding someone's hand. And this is the quality of presence that's invited for you to live in a different way when we say, what would love have me do today? There's a public monument, a government monument on the streets of Louisville, Kentucky at 4th Street downtown, which is a placard for the mystical experience of the great Christian mystic and writer Thomas Merton, because he'd come out of the monastery where he'd been practicing as the monks do, making the nuns, making their prayers and so forth. And he was walking down the street, and all of a sudden he said, I had a new vision that wasn't there in the holiness of the monastery, but that it was here where I am. And he began to look into the eyes of each person going by. He said, and suddenly I saw the secret beauty behind the eyes of everyone who walked by. That shining spirit, the child of the spirit, inviolable that was born in them. He said, and all the holiness of the monastery dropped away. This is what I've been looking for. And he said, the only problem was that I wanted to get down on my knees and worship each other, each person that walked by. When we see with these eyes, as Merton said, no more need for war or greed or cruelty. It's because we know who we are. And you know this as well as I do. A story for you. It was a busy morning when an elderly gentleman in his 80s came into the clinic to get stitches in his hand removed. And the nurse said that there was a long line. And he said, oh, please, I need to get out of here. I have another appointment. And she said, oh, it's a small thing. I'll help you. So taking care of the wound, she asked him, did he have another doctor's appointment? And he said, no, he needed to go to the nursing home to eat breakfast with his wife. The nurse inquired as to her health. He told me she'd been there for a while. She was a victim of Alzheimer's disease. And as we talked, I asked if she would be upset if he was a bit late. He replied, she no longer knew who he was and that she'd not recognized him in 5 years now. I was surprised, said the nurse. And you still go every morning, even though she doesn't know who you are? He smiled, patted her hand and said, she doesn't know me, but I still know who she is. And the nurse said that the tears rolled down her cheeks, goosebumps and all. That's the kind of love I would like to live in my own life. And we know it. You know it, and I know it. I know it when I've gone to spend time with my dear friend Ram Dass, especially toward the end of his life, in a wheelchair and infections and sick a lot and a major stroke. And he said, all I want to do at the end of my life is love. I love everything. And you see this huge altar with pictures of saints and sages and gurus and stuff. And in the middle, there's Donald Trump and Dick Cheney and people he might have had some different view about. He said, I love it all. I love the curtains and the floor, and the storms that come. And when you got to be with him, especially toward the end of his life, he had that power that they say in India is called the glance of mercy. When somebody looks at you so deeply, it's as if they see your whole dance, your whole incarnation, the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows, and love it all, and love who you are underneath it all. And I know this staying with my father in the ICU when he was dying, and he was terrified because he was a scientist and he taught in medical school, and he was afraid, oh, what happens when you die? Turn into dirt, nothing. And he was terrified. He kept looking at the monitors to see if he had died. And what I could do was hold his hand. And then it was tired. It was the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning each night. I wanted to get some rest. He said, please don't go. I said, all right. I know how to stay. I know how to see you. And I said, beside which I've had out of the body experiences, and I've sat with people dying and they leave and they come back and you let go and you go into the light. And I've had all these past life experiences. I told him all this stuff. And he looked at me skeptically and I said, well, Dad, you're a scientist, right? He said, yeah. So don't start with a conclusion about what happens. I said, you're on the big adventure. And it might be that you find yourself floating out of your body, out of the pain that you're in, into an ocean of light and love. And if it happens, remember, I told you so. Anyway, we know something. And I just want to celebrate that you can quiet yourself and walk among the trees and see with those eyes of love. And that underneath it all, in the end, that's what matters. Trudy, dear?
Wow, thank you, Jack. What does love want me to do? I think it wants me to give you a kiss.
Oh,
I
thank you.
appreciate your teaching so much.
Me too. I appreciate yours. And I haven't even heard you
I was
tonight.
going to say, you haven't heard it yet.
I hope I appreciate them. We'll see.
Yeah. So what does love want us to do? You know, in this time of so much misinformation and polarization and meta crises and all the interconnected challenges that we face at this time in the world of war and violent racism, and I'm not even going to list them all, we really need the kind of pro-social practices that Jack and I teach and are sharing with you tonight. And we need them because I think love wants us to stay bonded, to stay mended, to heal, and to be inspired, and to support each other in this. And I was remembering a story about my brother who passed away this year. I've been thinking about him a lot. He's my little brother, but he jumped the line and went first. And there was a time when earlier in his life, he was in a halfway house. He had emerged from the hospital. He was struggling with mental illness. And a meditation teacher of mine, a Japanese Soto Zen monk, came with me to visit my brother. And so we walked up these rickety steps of the halfway house and we get to his room. And the first thing I notice is this ashtray, like full of ashes and bubble gum. And I'm thinking, God, John, couldn't you have like emptied the ashtray before we came? You know, I had some judgment, right? And we go into the room and my teacher, Coben, looks around and we had a visit, you know, usual exchange of news and pleasantries and so forth. And then Coben reached into the sleeve of his robe. He had these big sleeves of his monk's robe. And he pulled out a calligraphy brush, an ink stone, and the little thing that you rub to make the ink. And he asked for some water. And he rubbed it and he made the black ink and then he dipped his brush in it. Then he pulled out a scroll from his sleeve. And I wondered, does he carry these things around all the time for this sort of occasion? I don't know. But he laid the scroll out on the little table in my brother's room and he made a beautiful Japanese calligraphy. And then we wondered, what does it say? And he read it to us. And it said, "Life blooms in the midst of suffering." And my brother was very moved. I was very touched. It was something that my brother treasured as long as he could. And And in that moment, that's what Coben saw. He didn't see the ashtray full of cigarette butts and bubble gum, or if he saw it, he just saw it as, yes, this is part of the suffering of life, to be in a shabby place and doing your best and comforting yourself the ways that you can. And the way that he saw it was the way that love sees it. Oh, yes, here's some suffering. And in the midst of it, we're alive, we're here, we're present, we're together. Life blooms in the midst of suffering. So this is a teaching that has really meant a lot to me over the years. And it's helped me stay grateful and happy, even amidst the tragedies that are happening, the lives lost in war, the kids shot at the University of Virginia. I cried over that one, having a grandson in college. So very close to home, all of the things that are deeply, deeply troubling in our world, that even in the midst of this, life blooms and we can feel grateful for the happiness, for the love, whatever we have of these things in our lives. And the miracle of this kind of mindfulness presence, mindful awareness, is that it can hold it all. Love and hate, joy and sorrow, suffering and the blossoming of life, these can all peacefully exist in the same heart. We can hold it all. And just as love and happiness are part of being alive, so is grief and anger and fear and despair. They're all natural to us. And life can change on a dime. Many of you have experienced this. I have experienced this. Even the luckiest among us can suddenly face great suffering. And these practices of being grounded, I think love wants us to be present, to be awake enough to see the secret beauty of each other and the ordinariness of things in that beautiful poem that Jack just read. When love or loving kindness meets suffering, what happens? It turns into compassion. It turns into caring. All living beings want to be happy. And knowing how much we all want our lives to unfold in a good way, I think love wants us to feel connected to all life, feel our kinship with all life, with the humans, animals, plants, all those in existence. So I'd like to do a practice together. One of my first teachers said that the best way to calm our busy minds is to give our attention something to play with. He said, like a teddy bear, like a child plays with their teddy bear. When they're worried or sad, they go to their teddy bear. And in meditation, the teddy bear, at least for this evening, is our breath. So even though the mind wanders around, you'll see, many of you are probably meditators already. You know how much the mind likes to wander into the past and the future. But just as the child always comes back to her bear, we can always come back to the breath. And we can find this breath of life over and over again. And we can begin to experience that the breath actually loves us. It is our lifelong companion and keeps us alive as long as we are. So I want to encourage you once again to just feel your feet on the floor, however you're sitting, to just feel wherever your body is, to gently close your eyes, to take a deep breath in, just breathing in the aliveness of this moment. And a breath out. And one more time, breathing in. And as you breathe out, relaxing, releasing any tension. And one more time, just feeling your breath as it fills your body and then releases. Now just receive the breath, one breath at a time. Keeping your breath company with your loving attention, just like holding your teddy bear in a soft cuddle. Just letting the breath breathe you in its own natural rhythm. And whenever your attention wanders away from being present with the breath, being right here, just gently coming back to keeping each breath company. Receiving the breath, receiving the moment. And when you're ready, opening your eyes, maybe wiggling your fingers and toes. And remember that when you, we, I, when we're navigating loss or any other difficult impasses we face in our lives, can always return to the breath and just softly breathe some tenderness into the moment. This is always possible. And we're not trying to banish suffering from our lives. What we're doing in meditation is changing our relationship to the suffering. When we respond to our vulnerability, to the vulnerability of others with kindness and with love, we're connecting to everyone who feels vulnerable and everyone who cares. Because we're not actually alone, even though the pandemic has been such a lonely time for so many people. These practices of grounding, of being present and aware, they actually help us overcome the illusion of hardcore separateness that just leads to so much loneliness and othering and sorrow. So I see, I'm watching our time, and I want to end with the encouragement to each one of us that it's not about getting or having love. It's about being love. You can see behind me the bumper sticker, be love. It's about being love, choosing to be a more loving person during the time that we have in this life, to the best of yours, of mine, of our ability. And I'm closing with a piece of a poem by Lynn Ungar called Pandemic. It's the end. She says, do not reach out your hands, reach out your heart, reach out your words, reach out all the tendrils of compassion that move invisibly where we cannot touch. Promise the world, promise this world your love, for better or for worse, in sickness and in health, so long as we all shall live. So thank you so much. Thank you for inviting us. Thank you, Sharon, for telling us about Hospice of Santa Barbara. And thank you all.
Thank you so much, Trudy and Jack. We're so grateful for your words and your sharing. I have the pleasure now to introduce our moderator for this evening, Charles Caldwell from Hospice of Santa Barbara, who you all saw a bit earlier. Charles has devoted the last 2.5 decades to working in the nonprofit sector, nonprofit service. At Pacifica Graduate Institute, he graduated with an MA in mythological studies and depth psychology. He is inspired by his work at Hospice of Santa Barbara and by his young son, Jack. He also enjoys fishing, I might add. So Charles, please take it away. I'll pass it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Jack and Trudy. As I was sitting here and then breathing, I could feel that calmness kind of enter my body, exactly as you were saying. And that's such a joy to have those moments. I think David had mentioned my son, Jack. So Jack's almost 3 years old. And so our lives get pretty hectic. And as I was having the opportunity to just pause for a moment and kind of take that in, it just kept kind of entering into my mind just how challenging it is for people in the hecticness of their lives, of how they can stop to even begin to start a practice. So I just wanted to kind of start off by asking the two of you, for the people who aren't necessarily practiced meditators, how should they make that break that begins them on this journey?
Well, I love what you say. I'm also thinking about your son, and one of our grandchildren is just turning 4 today. And there's a beautiful book. I'm trying to remember the title. I think it's called Mindful Parent, Mindful Child, but it might be also, Happy Parent, Happy Child. And the person who wrote it was years ago I was talking to, said, I didn't talk about child first. I talked about the parents, because you as a parent or whatever, if you're in a company or you're working with others or you're an artist or you're a healer or something, if you can find a way to steady yourself, it changes everything around you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a really powerful thing to sense that that's possible for you, which is really what you're asking. And there are tools to do it. For some people, sitting in meditation, as Trudy invited, a mindfulness of breathing, or as I invited, just becoming the loving witness of what's present without judging it. Things settle down. Sometimes it's just going out in nature or listening to music. And a lot of it has to do with self-care. The mindfulness world has exploded in the dimension of mindful self-compassion and how you care for yourself, especially in these stressful times. That's what I would particularly commend. I don't know if Trudy wants to add anything to that.
No, I think that's complete. Thank you.
Wonderful. That I certainly notice in all the interactions with my son Jack, that where I'm at completely changes the whole dynamic, and it kind of ties in a little bit to something, Trudy, that you were talking about when you first asked that question, what would love have me do today? You talked about a time of bonding, time in our kind of crazy world. And it feels like in a country and in a world where divisiveness has grown so incredibly strong just within my lifetime, it feels like it's amazing, frankly, to see how that grows. Any kind of thoughts or suggestions about that practicing of things that can actually bring us together at a time when it feels that there's so many things that are pulling us apart?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. Yeah, thank you so much. Because and I've we've all witnessed, especially in the last 7 years, the increased, and with social media and all the things we know that have contributed, the algorithms that are contributing to making it much harder for us to know and understand each other. I only get on my feed the things that the algorithms know I'm interested in. So I don't ever get to really learn about other things unless I reach around. And I think that's where these practices can help us sort of steady our own hearts enough to wonder, what is it that is making this other person maybe be so upset or fixed in their views? Or I think love wants me to try to understand the other, and to understand rather than to judge, because we jump to judgment. I know I do it too, and really I think love wants us to try to understand rather than to judge, because there's reasons why we feel the things we feel. There's a reason why people are having the thoughts and feelings that they're having. And sometimes they don't maybe know, but often they do. And to be curious about each other is a kind of mindfulness practice too, to really be curious instead of assuming we already know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially as we live in this time of so many kind of perceived certitudes that everybody seems to be holding so
Yes.
deeply and unchangeably. I've noticed that we've started to get a couple of questions coming in, and I just wanted to pause for a moment to invite everybody to, if you have questions for Jack and Trudy, please go ahead and place those in the chat. We'll try and get to as many of those as we can. There's an initial one from Chuck that said, I practiced mindfulness meditation for over 20 years and have recently begun doing TM twice a day. I found real value in both techniques. I'm curious if you believe there's a right way to practice.
I'd like to answer that, because I used to be so obsessed with doing everything right and being a good girl. I'm very happy to say that's not the case
You're not a
anymore.
good girl anymore.
No.
Congratulations.
You really helped me with that, Jack. Yeah, the only wrong kind of meditation is the one you don't do at all. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that there's something really wonderful to be gained. Every practice has its strong suits. And for example, TM is very strong on building concentration, focusing on one point of a mantra, or in that case, usually that's what it is. And then really shutting out all the distractions, just honing your capacity to concentrate and focus. It's really good at that. But then insight meditation or mindfulness meditation, as you know, is really good at opening to whatever's happening and being aware of that, and learning to be present with a whole series of different ups and downs of life and so forth. They both have their strengths, but the main thing is that whatever you're drawn to doing, trust that and do it for a while and see how it works for you. This is the advice, to try things out in the laboratory of yourself and trust the results that you're having.
Wonderful. And Jeannie West said, would you please speak a little bit more about being love, about what being present to others can communicate?
One of the things about answering questions like that is, I wish, and I ask for people in the chat, I would reply, what makes you ask? Because the very quality that Trudy is talking about is part of that mindful, loving awareness. And it might be, oh, I'm in conflict with my sister or my brother and have been for a while. Or, the work situation is not that good. Or there's racism that I feel, microaggressions and people being harmed and so forth. So they're all different possibilities behind that question. Would you repeat it again? Please.
Jeannie asks, would you please speak a bit more about being love, about what being present to others can communicate?
So in all those things that I named, one of the best things that you can do is ask yourself, what's my best or highest intention? There you are, perhaps in conflict with someone or undertaking a difficult task and so forth, or someone has, in some way disagreed or insulted you, before you respond in any of those situations, you can take a deep breath or two, the mindful, loving pause, and then ask yourself, what's my best intention? And instead of trying to defend yourself or be right or get over things, which is if we feel attacked, that's our natural. Instead, when you ask, what's my highest intention? The heart answers. And it says, oh, I want to work this out. I want to come to some place of well-being or peace, generally speaking. I want to find some resolution. And your tone of voice changes.
Yes.
And the gaze of your eyes becomes warmer. So it doesn't take that long to tune into your best intention. And that's the doorway to being love.
Yeah. This connects a little bit with what you were just saying, Jack. And somebody made a comment about, please speak more on loving my enemy. So as you kind of mentioned, the connections we have in daily life, but with sisters and brothers and wives and husbands, and something that certainly kind of seems like it's arisen in our society a lot more, is like a deeper antipathy that people are feeling towards the other. How does one kind of move past that, to take that pause when their whole inclinations are to not pause that way?
Go ahead.
Okay. It's, first of all, I just want to say it's hard when all of you wants to react. And one of the things that, those of you who do practice mindfulness know is we talk a lot about the difference between reacting and responding. And that ability to take a deep breath and just ask yourself, what would love want me to do? Or what is my best intention here? I think it allows for there to be a response. And one of the things that is true is that life tends to mirror back to us the way that we are. So if we meet somebody with the intention to understand, if we meet somebody with kindness, if we meet somebody with curiosity and interest, chances are that will get mirrored back to us. It often happens that way. And so I think that it's one of the points of the practice is to help us look at our own hearts and look at ourselves, not like shaming ourselves or blaming ourselves or taking all responsibility for everything, but just looking into ourselves and saying, okay, where am I coming from and what is my intention here? And what's more likely to lead to some mutual understanding or perhaps a moment of friendship or warmth, as opposed to deepening the sense of alienation from each other.
Yeah. Feels like we live in an age now where some of that introspection and being able to look within ourselves can be very useful when so much energy seems to be pointed outward from ourselves towards others. And asks a question, which she says, how much do you ignore or avoid the news? Ignorance is bliss?
We're different. You answer.
One of the experiences I've had traveling or being on long retreats in monasteries in the mountains of Asia or various other places is that when I get back, if it's a few months where I haven't read the news, almost nothing's changed. There'll be one or two big things, some election happened or there was a tragedy, a flood or whatever. But actually, it's pretty much the same thing over and over again. So I do want to keep track and I read it, but not very much because there's not that much new in it. William Carlos Williams said, you can't get the news from poetry, but men and women die every day for lack of what is found there. And what he's saying is that we actually need to support our hearts by turning toward what's beautiful, what's connecting. Even in this hour, there are 1 billion acts of kindness happening on this earth, of mothers putting rice gruel or scrambled eggs or whatever on the plates of their children in the morning, and people stopping at the red light so you can go through the green one, or, standing in line and not elbowing you out of the way. The world is full of goodness as well. And the news tends to kind of try to spike alarm because that's where it gets our attention. It goes to the most primitive part of our brain. So when you meditate, one of the great things, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Vietnamese Zen master, says, with each breath you can whisper inside calm or steady, inviting that in. And then if people need support, there's all these beautiful online meditation trainings that you can do that just is a little whisper in your ear to say, okay, you can calm, you can steady here too. And we have, Trudy has them at Inside LA or on my website. You can do a free 40 days, 15 minutes instruction every day. Here's how to calm steady the mind, how to cultivate compassion, loving kindness. So it's there. And that practice is really what changes us.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And Jack, would you just mention the URL for your website?
It's jackkornfield.com.
Pretty straightforward and simple.
Trudy?
And Trudy?
Well, I'm trudygoodman.com, and I want to say insightla.org. There are meditations every morning, guided meditations, and Beth Sternlieb has a group that's wonderful. I think it's at 7:30. They're not long, but you can find them at insightla.org under practice groups.
Yeah, those are wonderful resources for everything that we're talking about. Trudy, do you follow the news a little bit more intently?
No, I think a little less, actually.
Wow, wonderful.
Well, I think I have I don't know, I would maybe say a slightly eating disordered relationship to the news, where there are times when I will just start reading it and I can't stop, and I just down the rabbit hole of it. And then there are times when I really feel like, no, I take a fast, a news fast. And I do notice how much better I feel when I'm not reading the news. We don't have television, so that helps too, because we're not seeing the actual images. They're so vivid and troubling, but it's troubling enough. Actually, I would like to speak to a question that came up about self-blame and shame, if that would be okay.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, because it's hard to be love if you're beating up on yourself. It starts at home. And, that saying, very famous and probably core teaching, it's in some way common to all traditions, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But I also say, do unto yourself as you would have others do unto you. You would like others to be kind to you and forgiving, and not to blame or shame you for your mistakes. We're all imperfect. So if you can maybe just even have a phrase that you say to yourself, I forgive myself for being imperfect. I forgive myself for making mistakes. Take a mindful self-compassion course at Insight LA. I mean, it's really helpful to begin to tame those wild voices of self-criticism and recrimination that often exist inside us, and often they're the internalized voices of people who took care of us when we were young. Whatever the source of those voices, it's really important to tame them so that you can be more loving with yourself. Then you automatically feel more loving to other people.
Wonderful. I'm glad that you spoke to that question. Yeah, when I kind of going back to the beginning, and as we were talking a little bit about my son Jack and the world that he's growing up in, and some of those kind of the divisiveness that we spoke about, that seems like it's kind of been rising over this past. This is kind of a question about on kind of a meta level a little bit about, do you feel that you have any insight from your work over decades with people about, is there something kind of transitioning in our world a little bit in terms of how people are kind of perceiving themselves and the others around them? So this is a little question, not only asking you to tell the future, but a little bit kind of, what do you have some insight just from that journey that you've been on and seeing what's happening with people out there? Because I think everybody's trying to understand what's happening in our world.
There will be suffering. There are new kinds, but there have been plenty of kinds of suffering in the past. So that's the first thing. Our idea that it should somehow be different than that is not talking about the human realm where we are. Now, there are some really important inner understandings, and that is that no amount of technology, of internet and computers and social and space technology and nanotechnology and artificial intelligence is going to stop continuing warfare, or stop continuing racism, or stop continuing environmental destruction, because those are born in the human heart. And so what's true in the world now, we are grappling with in our modern way, is that we've made all these amazing modern technologies and so forth, some of which are good, some of which are used in destructive ways, but that we have to match the outer technology now with our inner technology development. Like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at one point said, we're a nation of nuclear giants and ethical infants. So it's not just a personal matter, but humanity is actually being called to evolve in some way. And we know this is possible because we know it from history, but also neurosciences. You can actually change. You can become less reactive. You can become more compassionate. And as you do, it changes your life and those around you. So we become that. We become that person that is what the world needs of us in some way. So I just see that as our task.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's kind of like that. Almost like to think globally, act locally, but even more individually than that. That to have an impact on that greater world, it really comes down to each of us.
Yeah. And the more greed and the more hatred and anger and ignorance, the more we suffer. But the more we discover that that's not who we are, that who we are actually cares underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we have then love and understanding and connection, the world changes.
Yeah. And I love early on in one of the practices, it was really just about sitting in the chair, feeling your body, and being present and listening to your body. And it feels a little bit like during this last journey of a couple of years with the pandemic, with living in a culture that likes to sometimes avoid the topic of death, or the fact that we all have and face mortality, and the work we do at Hospice Santa Barbara certainly runs into that quite a bit. But it feels like all of a sudden people gained a new awareness of the fact that their body was vulnerable in a way that didn't exist before. Related specifically to that kind of question of the body, do you feel that the work in doing the meditation and mindfulness can help reshift that awareness of body away from this one that's a little fearful, I think, in a lot of ways right now? Maybe you could just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, and I think especially for parents of young children or pregnant people, or it's a very vivid question. What will the world be for our children and our grandchildren in our case? And there is a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. And the one thing I would say is that our media really does, without intending to, amplify all of that. by reporting on all the disasters and catastrophes and climate breakdowns and signs of, everything falling apart. Because, I mean, the media, they're people too, and they're scared too. And I think we forget, for me, what really helps is to know so many people doing so many cool things that are beneficial for the world, just like what you're doing at Hospice of Santa Barbara, helping people ease their way out of this life in a culture that doesn't even allow people to talk about death. For years, I led, and they still go on, but I don't lead them anymore, retreats for professional caregivers of those who, doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists and all those who sit at the bedside of critically ill and dying children and adults. And one of the hardest things for them is that they couldn't talk about their work with anybody. You can't go home from work and talk about it. You can't talk about it at a gathering or a dinner party or something. But all of that is just to say that I feel like some of the unmentionables in our culture, because of the media, it's like so much goodness that's happening too. And really innovative ideas of how to cope with this and water shortages and how to, so many things. And how do we find out about them? I think when we calm our own hearts, again, it's that mirroring thing. When we're not on sort of hypervigilant, high alert for all the scary stuff, we're more likely to hear about and notice and receive and take in the goodness that's also here.
Well, I know that we're getting to the end of our time together, and that feels like a wonderful kind of place to wrap up with that focus on love and the wonderful things that are happening around us. And I think I can certainly speak to everyone who's been with us tonight that a wonderful thing for all of us has been the two of you, and just with your presence and your words and your practice and sharing with us, so we could all have a little moment of calmness. So deep gratitude from all of us who've been with you tonight.
Thank you.
And just gratitude to you and to all the Santa Barbara Hospice, what you've done for such a long time and for this series. So thanks to everyone for coming.
All the beautiful work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And with that, I'll invite David to come back on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Trudy and Jack, for being with us tonight and sharing. And Charles, thank you for holding the space with our conversation tonight as well. All of us are so pleased at Hospice of Santa Barbara to be able to offer our Illuminate Speakers series for free. But as Charles shared earlier, we couldn't do it without your help. So please consider a donation to help ensure the future of this series by clicking the link in the chat feature here. And please visit our website to sign up for upcoming Illuminate events that are free and open to everyone. We have a new season of such events in 2023. Just check our website as we share who will be presenting next. So thank you all so much for being with us this evening, and have a good rest of the week. Bye-bye.